In this video, we're going to go through 22 tips for the IELTS speaking test, part 3. A lot of students think it is one of the most difficult parts of the test, and they're correct, it is. Part 1 is generally a warm-up, part 2 is your monologue, and in part 3 is where the examiner can really test you and check your language level. Let's get straight on with tip number 1. Tip 1. This is a discussion part of the test, and it's much more natural and free-flowing than the other two parts. It'll be a general discussion with the examiner where he'll ask you questions and expect you to give answers and elaborate on those answers. Tip 2. It lasts for around 5 minutes and the examiner will ask between 4 and 8 questions, usually with follow-up questions. Tip 3. The main thing again is to speak naturally and fluently and with good pronunciation. It will also test your ability to give opinions and then justify those opinions with examples, evidence, reasons, and maybe even consequences. Tip 4. The questions will ask you to analyse, speculate, or discuss some current issues about what you talked about in your monologue in the IELTS speaking test part 2. Tip 5. The questions and the discussion you have with the examiner in part 3 of the IELTS speaking test will be directly related to what you spoke about in your monologue or the long term for part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. So try not to be shocked when the examiner finishes your monologue with some follow-up questions about what you might have just talked about. Tip 6. For example, if in your IELTS speaking test part 2 you were asked to describe your favourite teacher, then in the IELTS speaking test part 3 you'll be asked about issues to do with education. Things like, how has education changed in the last 50 years? Or if you were talking about work or a favourite job that you've had, or a job that you would like to have or not like to have in the IELTS speaking test part 2, in the part 3 of the IELTS speaking test, you may be asked about how technology has changed work, or how work has changed now women are in the workplace, or how work is different in your country than it is in other countries. Tip 7. Try to speak about the issues in a general way. Try to take yourself out of the equation. So instead of saying, I think that, you can say, thinking about this in general, I think that. You see, there's a very subtle change there. Try and keep it general. Try not to talk about yourself too much and what you've done. Try to give reasons outside of your experience. Tip 8. Watch this video here on the DEAR method that I've made about the IELTS speaking test part 3. The DEAR method is a structure to answering questions, which is D, direct answer, E, explain your answer, second E, give examples to back up your point, and R is to reiterate or restate your opinion. Tip 9. Because you're going to be speaking generally, here are some words you can use that make sure you speak generally. Broadly speaking, on the whole, in most cases, the vast majority of. You see, this takes yourself out of the equation and it allows you to speak generally. Write these down. Tip 10, because you're going to be giving examples, as I said in the DEAR method, here are some good phrases before you give an example. For example, for instance, a personal example of this is, a clear example of this would be, a striking example of this would be, or even a classic example of this would be, and then give the example afterwards. Tip 11, study some issues before the test. This will give you a general idea so you won't be shocked. This doesn't mean you should memorize some answers because you have no idea what the examiner is going to say. However, it is good to get some issues that you have an opinion on: the environment, education, sport, work, the internet. All these come up quite often, so it's good to have some opinions about where you think these issues are going to go in the future, how they are in your country, how they've changed since the past. These are the kind of questions you'll be asked. So read up on some of the subjects and form some opinions. Tip 12, speaking of opinions, don't try to match what you think to what you think the examiner is going to think. The examiner is not going to judge you on your actual opinion. They're judging on how well you give ideas, discuss, and give examples. So don't worry about what the examiner thinks of your answer. Just make sure you say it fluently and with good pronunciation. And with a smile. Tip 13, don't memorize answers. As I said in the previous tip, this is going to get you nowhere. Don't memorize whole answers. Don't really even memorize phrases that you can just shove in there. However, do learn some vocabulary, do learn some grammatical structures, and do look at ways in which to talk about your opinion. Again, check out the Dear Method video I've made. I'll put a link in the description. And also, even if you are using really fancy vocabulary, which you can do if you're comfortable with it, it is usually better to use simple vocabulary correctly than it is to use complex and advanced vocabulary incorrectly. Keep that in mind. Tip 14, give results or consequences in your answer. Don't just use short answers like you did in part 1. Part 1 is really just a warm-up. So you can use as a result or give consequences by using these words. As a result, consequently, therefore, because of this. Or even something simple like so. Tip 15, it's always good to give comparisons of these issues in different countries. It's a really high-level technique for your grammar and vocabulary. Here are some ways you can give contrasts or similes or compare different countries. Have a look just here. Similarly, in the same way, however, in contrast to, although, on one hand, on the other hand, and also whereas. Tip 15, ask for clarification if you don't really understand the question. A lot of students are worried about this and try not to make too much of a habit out of it, but in one or two of the questions, if you don't understand what the examiner means, just ask him or her to restate the question or what do you mean by that? It's much better to do that than to just speak about something that might be irrelevant to what the question was. Always get clarification. Tip 16, relax and try to be confident. The examiners know that it's a very high pressure and stressful situation to be talking in your second or third language for at this point about 10 minutes. So relax, try to be confident. If you make some mistakes, don't worry about them, just keep going. Not only that, but being confident and smiling will improve your pronunciation and your fluency. So keep that beamer. Tip 17, my students are always asking me, how do I improve my vocabulary? And I get that, I understand, because vocabulary is worth 25% of the mark for the speaking test. However, so is not making any errors. So yes, learn vocabulary. And how do I do that? The best tip to learning vocabulary is to read books. And then you learn vocabulary by osmosis. So when you're reading a book and you come across a word you don't understand, look it up. Or on a YouTube video, if you don't understand what the word osmosis is, Google it and then you will know. And maybe you can even use it in the IELTS speaking test part 3. Tip 18, grammar is also 25% of the IELTS speaking test part 3. So how do I improve my grammar? Again, it's the same thing, reading and being exposed to English as much as you possibly can be. It doesn't have to be a novel, it could be the internet or Twitter. It can be speaking to your friends, it can be practicing with your teacher, it can even be watching movies and copying what they say. You will learn grammar just by being around it. Also, maybe you can learn some grammatical structures to use. Tip 19, just keep talking. A lot of the times the student, again, are tired because they've been speaking for 10 to 14 minutes in their second or third language, so they freeze up because they want the test to be over. Try not to do that, just try and get through the last couple of minutes and just keep talking. The examiner at this point in the test will keep you on task. He'll try and keep what you're saying relevant by asking you a different question or by asking you to start again or asking you to just breathe. He might also ask you follow-up questions like, what do you mean by that? Or why do you think this? And this is just them trying to encourage you to keep speaking through the IELTS speaking test part 3. Tip 20. Tip 20 is my favorite one because it is like and subscribe to Smash Exams. Give this video a like because then you'll get all of the videos when I release them, usually 2 or 3 a week. And all of the videos are dedicated to you passing your IELTS test. So hit that like button and subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next video. Tip 21. Don't worry about the questions getting more and more difficult. That is by design. The examiner wants to stretch you to see where the limits of your English language learning is. So don't get flustered and don't worry if you can't answer a question. Anybody that goes into the IELTS test will struggle towards the end of part 3 because the examiner is doing it on purpose to try and find where your band level is. If you're speaking perfectly all the way through, this is a really good time for the examiner to see if you're a band 8.5 or a 9 or a band 6.5 or a 7. So they will stretch you. So there will be questions you can't answer. There will be questions that you struggle on. Don't worry about it. That's all part of the test. That's why it's called a test. You will fail at some point because that's what the examiner's job is. And they're not trying to be mean or nasty. No, they just want to discern where your level is. So don't worry if you can't answer a question. Just relax and we'll go to the next one. Tip number 22, just relax. You've got this. You've done all the preparation beforehand. You've been confident, you've given it your best shot. There's not much you can do one day before or even in the test itself, and being nervous, and I know it's easy to say, but being nervous just kind of makes you a bit more worried and on edge. So my final tip, and it's the biggest one, relax. You've planned for this, just go in, be confident, get through the 15 minutes, and then you'll be fine. Thank you for watching the video to the end. If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. It is a really good one. Or maybe this one. I think this is a playlist or a YouTube recommend. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Good luck and smash those exams.